I want to show you this painting I just finished. And I also want to talk about some of the books on this shelf and the artists who inspire my work. This is done in gouache on cotton paper, and I originally made this painting in Procreate. It was really fun recreating all of the different colors and shapes, this time on paper, and it was a great reminder that digital painting is my favorite way to start. If you like this painting, I share a lot of my process here on this channel, so you can go ahead and subscribe. These are the books that we're going to be looking at together today, some of the artists who inspire a lot of my work, and we're starting with Gerhard Richter's Atlas. Now this is a tome, it is huge. Then I'll show you Jonas Wood's Interiors book, Edward Hopper. Then, if you don't know, you should know Lois Dodd. She's amazing. A classic, Vermeer. And we'll round everything off talking a little bit about David Hockney's photography. So back to the Atlas. It is so big, and it's where Gerhard Richter would collect a lot of images. So what I really love about this book is that it is kind of like Tumblr. So when I first picked it up, I was at the Art Institute of Chicago's bookstore, and I remember seeing the way in which Richter had organized all of his images, and it made me think about how the archive looked on Tumblr at the time. So I have always thought about image collection, whether it's on Tumblr or Pinterest, as a huge part of my practice. And I also really like to shoot photos either on my camera or directly on my iPhone. And I have often said that my iPhone is essentially my favorite little sketchbook because I always have it on hand. I can pull it out of my pocket and snap a lot of different photos. And what I love about seeing this is seeing these 16 square compositions or these 9 square compositions of Richter collecting all of these different images that he would later use for paintings. And you can see on some of the ones that were used for paintings, there's kind of covered oil paint all over the pages. I also like how he uses tape in order to block off a particular section or shift the composition away from the original photo. But this is just a massive collection. It really feels like scrolling through someone's camera roll on their phone. And I want to show you these. So these were the photo references for the candle paintings that Richter has on display at the Art Institute of Chicago. Those always impressed me. All right, now on to Jonas Wood's Interiors. I got this book when I was in my senior year of college after finding his work online and absolutely freaking out because I was also making a lot of work about interiors and playing with perspective and pattern in a similar way that he does. I really like the flat shapes, the way in which pattern becomes the thing that is unifying the often disjointed shapes that exist in these interior spaces. And I think what I also really like about Jonas Wood is that he's drawing things like bathrooms, right? Finding ways to make the mundane really beautiful. I love all of his everyday scenes. And this one in particular I found incredibly inspiring because when I was in college, I loved painting my messy bedroom. It was a perfect portrait of where I was at the time in the utter chaos. And so all of those details that he shows here just made me feel at home. Next up, I have this Edward Hopper book, and it has this little price tag on the top that was written by my grandmother. So she used to work as a volunteer at the Elk Grove Village Library in Illinois and would set aside books from their book sale for me that she thought I would either love or books that were of artists that I specifically told her about and geeked out over. So Edward Hopper was definitely one of them. And as I was going through this book, I found all of his landscape paintings again. And man, these are so inspiring. I love the way that he simplifies shape. It really reminds me of coastal California landscapes, even though a lot of these are painted from coastal Maine. I am definitely going to be using this as a reference more and more. And this is what got me into Hopper. So all of his paintings of kind of lonely Americans existing in interior spaces. When I was a junior in college, most of my work was all about the figure and finding a way to place the figure in these sort of lonely spaces that reflected how the space told the story of the character. It's also when I was making a lot of art about The Sims. It was an awkward time, but it was a great time to learn. What I love about Hopper is both the way that he captures light and environment and atmosphere. You're probably familiar with his Nighthawks painting, which is at the Art Institute of Chicago. That one you can see here. All right, Lois Dodd. Oh my goodness. I discovered Lois Dodd a couple of years ago when I was working on my series of Windows paintings. So I went from making screenshots of my Mac as paintings, and then when I started working at Apple, I jokingly said, okay, I'm going to make 95 paintings of Windows because I can't paint my Mac desktop anymore. And I just started making these window paintings, and a friend of mine was like, hey, have you seen Lois Dodd? And I said, no, who? And oh my gosh, her paintings are just absolutely wonderful. I love the detail in all of her landscapes. And she's got a really playful sense of humor. So sometimes she'll be more cartoonish and playful and more pulled back from realism. But then she also has a lot of paintings that do similar things to Hopper in showcasing the mundane, in having this one subject matter that unifies these different kind of fragmented parts. And I often think about interiors as being one of the places where all of the fragmented parts of our identity get unified and create a sense of wholeness for us, whereas we might otherwise see ourselves as all of these ambiguous, varied selves, especially growing up on the internet and all of the different places that I have performed myself online in the digital. I also really love the way that Dodd uses paint. This painting in particular was a huge inspiration for the painting I'm going to be working on with you today. I love all of the ways that she worked with windows, from a really, really small, tiny view to up close and personal. And again, her landscapes, truly stunning. Next up, let's talk about Vermeer. Now, for me, when I was in college, figuring out that Vermeer actually used a camera obscura was one of the most important realizations and justifications for me to keep making work when I otherwise thought I shouldn't. So again, lonely people in a room, but using that camera obscura allowed Vermeer to capture light in a way that is truly unbelievable. When I saw his work in person for the first time at the Met, I actually teared up. I was so moved by the intensity of detail and the gorgeous, gorgeous use of light. All of his paintings have a tendency to just feel like they absolutely glow. And I know that part of that is because he used lead white, but more on that later. This painting in particular is the one that I saw at the Met. And when you get up close to it and you really see the detail, it is mind-blowing. That fabric, the light along the edge of the window, all of those reflections on the metal, it is stunning, truly stunning, and it inspires me every day. All right, lastly, I want to talk about David Hockney. So a lot of what I do, I work from photographs, and so photography is a huge part of my practice. It's often what I do to sketch when I'm out on a trail. I will just take 15 to 20 different photos of the same spot, kind of like Gerhard Richter's atlas, right? But here, What Hockney was doing is trying to think more about the way we as humans see. So he was making these collages that were built up of all of these different fragmented parts of the way that we perceive reality. We don't see things from one single frame that we can get away with just taking a snapshot photo and saying, this is how I experience seeing. Instead, what Hockney's doing is trying to make you slow down and think about the way that you actually perceive vision when you're sitting somewhere. It's all of these different fragmented parts, and that became really inspiring for me in terms of the drawings that I was making, and truly just so awesome. It's so funny how disjointed these images end up looking, but it makes you realize how much photography itself is sort of just a fabrication. It's just one simulation of the way that we see, and it doesn't always take in the totality of the way that we see, or the full version of our sense of vision. Here's a couple more. These are all done with Polaroids. Alright, so in honor of Vermeer, I am using a projector for this one. And because I did this painting in Procreate first, I was able to actually go back and isolate just the line drawing that I had made before working on the painting and export that as a JPEG, and here I am tracing it using my projector. It's often easier to use a projector at night, but my projector's pretty bright, so I'm just getting the basics of the shape, perspective, and lines here. Alright, cool. Now I'm bringing up the painting in Procreate and actually looking to make sure that my drawing with the projector is actually looking how I want it to on the surface of the paper. And I'm marking off all of my edges for how I want to tape it. Taping this off to my little bamboo surface. I got this little bamboo easel at IKEA and it is really awesome. It's in the kids section, if you're wondering. On to making the painting. So for this painting, I am using a set of artist's gouache. I'm going to put that set in the description, really going in here and carving out the window. So starting with kind of Lois Dodd first and foremost, getting all of the window shapes in there, and leaving little bits of the white of the paper, a thing I don't necessarily have to do while using gouache, but is a fun way to keep things super bright and give that sense of light that I was inspired by looking at someone like Vermeer. Laying down this blue was really fun. It's almost entirely pure ultramarine. Then I'm getting in the details of the things on the top of the shelf. And because it's gouache, I can layer more opaquely on top instead of having to worry about keeping every part of the paper white that I want to remain white. And kind of painting the blue of the wall all around. Oftentimes when I'm approaching painting, I'm thinking about it like a 10,000 piece puzzle. Like it really just is putting together each individual piece, mixing up the color of that little section, and then putting it together. And there are some painters who work from photos that like to work kind of like a printer from left to right in a grid motion. I don't like to work like that. I really like to think about the cohesiveness of the whole piece and how I can create balance by working in these larger sections and then focusing in on tiny details where it's necessary. A lot of painting, especially painting from photos, you're going to have a little bit of a sense of abstraction. You're not going to get everything exactly to the point of the photo. I mean, you can, but that's not necessarily fun for me. I like being able to play with how I can simplify shape to a certain degree where it'll create that sense of believability, but it also has a little bit more of a playful and less rigid approach to what I'm doing. So here I am blocking in all of this bookshelf here, adding in more of the golden hour light reflecting directly on the wall, and then coming in with more details. So adding in the jade plants, adding a little bit more details onto the figures and the frame. It's a photograph of me and my grandparents when I was really, really little. And then going in and penciling all of the different details on the books, keeping it abstract though, so that way you can see a little bit of your sense of self on that bookshelf. Alright, my favorite part, the tape peel. I always do this really carefully as to not rip the paper. Typically, if I'm using 100% cotton paper, I don't end up having the paper rip. I am using Pro Artist tape, and it's usually been pretty reliable for me. It can sometimes rip lower quality papers, so do be careful with it. But if you're using a 100% cotton paper, like what I'm using here, I'm using Arches, it's not going to rip on you. Or at least it shouldn't. It should behave. I love the way these crisp, clean edges look here. And the final piece of tape. I really love painting homes and interiors. They were a favorite of mine, and then I abandoned that subject matter for a really long time. But it's so interesting how when you move away from something for quite a while, and when you come back to it, you realize all of the reasons why you loved it so deeply in the first place. Alright, so that's about it. If you have any questions about this painting or about my process, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll respond in the next video. The next video that I'm going to be featuring here is actually going to be another interior portrait of the same size of a friend of mine's apartment in Kansas City. So I'll show what that'll look like here. So if you're excited about that, you can like this video, you can go ahead and subscribe to know when that next video comes out. And until next time, thanks for watching.